What's going on, my friends? I'm Sean Pierce Johnson, and welcome to Stompbox Saturday. Today, on the Stompin' Block, I am very excited to be showing you a brand new addition to NUX's reissue series of pedals in the form of the 6ixty 5ive Overdrive. Far be it from me to criticize a company and how they choose to name their products, but the idea of naming your pedal 65 with a 6 being the first character of 60, or really an apostrophe, and 5 being the first character of the word 5 is a little silly, but there's nothing silly about the fact that this thing produces some really great overdrive tones, and it does indeed replicate a pedal that we know and love as sort of a modern boutique legend. I'm sure once you see what this pedal looks like, you will know exactly what it is. So why don't we just jump right in and take a look at the pedal, talk about the controls, so we can get down to hearing some tones. Housed inside a beautiful sparkly brown enclosure and topped with cream or blonde amp knobs, we have a 4-knob overdrive that is capable of getting us great cranked American amp sounds. 4 controls for volume, gain, bass, and treble. So we get a little bit more control due to that bass and treble tone stack as opposed to your single tone knob. But it's the gain and the volume that are really the stars of the show here, in my opinion. You'll see it further on down in the video, but the gain that's on tap here is very musical. It works its way from almost sounding like an amp pushed with, say, a tube screamer to something a lot more broken in and cranked and a little fuzzy and very warm. And the output that's available on this pedal is just astronomically high. But there is a single sneaky hidden control. It's not really all that well hidden, it's pretty well marked out, and that's the trim pot. It basically is an input gain adjustment tool, with full clockwise being its least amount and full counterclockwise being its most saturated. You can sort of think of the trim control like a first gain stage. You can drive it a little bit harder, it gets some more grit sooner, and that way you won't have to turn up the gain knob so high on the pedal itself. Outside of that, you have a true bypass foot switch and an easy access battery door on the bottom. So if you want to run this on a 9-volt battery, you are more than welcome to do so. I am not going to be doing that today. I'm going to be getting some power off of a Big Joe Li2 rechargeable pedal power supply. And that is really all you need to know, so let's get down to hearing how this thing sounds. Let's talk about the rig before we hear it. Any guitar I plug in, we're going to start with the main Les Paul. It's going to come first and plug into a Boss TU3 on the floor that'll help keep us in tune. After that, I have a Boss OD1 from the 40th anniversary box set that we'll bring in later in the video. That then runs into the 6ixty 5ive Overdrive and out of the 6ixty 5ive Overdrive into a DoD Rubberneck analog delay. Everything is running into the front end of my Hughes & Kettner Black Spirit 200, and that's plugged into an orange PPC 212 speaker cab. That cab has Celestion Vintage 30s, and one of those Vintage 30s is mic'd up with a Shure SM57 and a Hilby Designs Boho ribbon microphone. The reverb you hear on the amplifier is not the built-in reverb, it is indeed my beloved CXM 1978 from Chase Bliss Audio. Now, to get us started, I think the logical place to start is with all knobs at noon with the trim pot turned full counterclockwise so we're not getting as much grit right off the bat. And just play around with these controls, specifically the gain and the EQ, but we are definitely gonna have to find a unity gain because you'll see from clean to effect engaged, there is a lot of output to this pedal, and that can either be a good thing or a bad thing. I personally think it's a good thing. It makes playing a little bit more exciting when you're louder. So let's get down to it. It's very interesting how much gain is on tap, even with the trim pot turned full counterclockwise. And you know, I want to make this note about the trim pot. This is really something that you really should just use your ears, because there's no real indicator in the literature of what's full down and full up. So you kind of just have to make that call with your ears, which is basically what I did. But the amount of gain that's in here is, you know, and it could be just the humbuckers, obviously, are affecting what's coming out of it. But man, we're getting some really cool cranked amp tones out of this. And little fuzzy. It's got a little bit of that kind of nice warm low end. But the articulation is definitely still there. And we haven't even touched the EQ. So now let's go ahead and do that. Same with the volume and the gain at 12, but we'll start messing around with the bass and the treble. liking how cranked up the treble knob doesn't feel too ice picky. I'm liking that it still feels like a good amp sound. And really, I'm just kind of surprised that it sounds like this with all knobs at noon. It's a great new character for the Black Spirit. It's not totally clean. Well, it's not clean. You know what I mean. But I do have a suspicion that if we change up the guitar that we plug into this pedal, that it's not only going to translate the character of that guitar well, but the gain staging of it is also going to be affected. So let's grab the Strat and let's have a little go around with that. With single coils, this thing turns into almost a completely different pedal, just by nature of switching up the pickups, their output levels, and how hard they're hitting that front end. This definitely does more of your amp overdrive kind of thing, and it doesn't get quite as fuzzy, but the range of adjustability is still there, and I really like the low gain stuff because it just makes these single coil pickups a little bit more exciting. I mean, come on. Sometimes a sound like this is cool, but then a sound like this, that lift, that fatness that we get, man, that's just, that's the Strat love language for me. But having shown this, now I think is the appropriate time for us to play around with that input trim a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and set the 65 right about here, emphasizing some highs and shaving off some lows, because I have a feeling once we start turning that trim, we're gonna get a lot more lows coming through. And well, let's just hear it and see how it sounds. I'm gonna go ahead and switch up to my navigator for this one. Interesting, this trim control, because I'm kind of hearing, I don't know, it's not really so much an extra little bit of grit thing, but it's almost like some different parts of your signal are coming through a little bit more. Turning it full counterclockwise, I feel really ups the chime. And as we turn it down, things start to darken up a little bit. So in a way, you could kind of play it like maybe a secondary EQ control. But again, you're really just gonna have to use your ears and figure out what exactly works best for you. And with all that having been said, I want to end off this video by showing you a few different sounds for a few different scenarios with a few different guitars. I think that we can find quite a lot of versatility from this pedal. So let's do it. If you have designs to use the 65 as sort of a preamp in front of your clean platform amp, just for a little bit of a different vibe and a different EQ curve, generally what I like to do is leave the trim knob turned to its full counterclockwise position and go for something like this. I feel like this is a great setting for that praise and worship context. Incorporate a little bit of delay, some reverb, but I can also drive this setting a little harder. So I'm gonna use the OD100 and kick it in when the energy gets a little higher. But I just like that it's just enough grit and a different character so that when I start to dig in, we get a little bit more harmonic excitement. Now, if you're in the mood for something a little bit muscly, but in that kind of driven American amp vibe, this is pretty much the setting. Putting the gain, the bass, and treble right around 1, 2 o'clock on the dial and adjusting volume to taste. Now with the trim pot, I turned it full counterclockwise and then did a quarter turn on my screwdriver to get the trim pot to where I wanted to be. That's the sweet spot for this setting. It's a little bit more compressed, but it just lends such a nice, beautiful distortion characteristic to these P90s in this Sterling Albert Lee model. So let's take a listen to it. it, friends, a look and listen to the new 65 Overdrive from NUX's reissue series. Well, if you hadn't guessed by now, this is indeed a clone of the Vemorem Jan Ray, which in and of itself is a bit of a modern boutique classic. And I have played a real Jan Ray, and I would say that the 65 gets pretty dang close to it. Maybe the Jan Ray is a little out of your reach. Well, the 65's not gonna be out of your reach, that's for darn sure. This thing is priced for the player, the budget-minded player, and it delivers tone in spades. And I love it, and I am having an absolute blast with it. If you enjoyed this video in any way, I would love it if you supported me in my endeavors to make better guitar videos for all types of players. There's a few things you can do, and the easiest is just to click that red subscribe button and ring the notification bell. But you can go one step above that and join my email club, where I send video links just like this one direct to your inbox. Just go to SeanPierceJohnson.com/email and fill out the form just with your name and email address. Once you're in the club, you're in the club, and you'll be privy to some of the cool things that we'll have going on later on this year. Thank you all so much for spending part of your day with me. I greatly appreciate your time. And until we see each other again, I'm Sean Pierce Johnson, wishing you all watching great tone, great health, and of course, happy stomping. Cheers, friends. God bless.